Alright, what's up everyone? Undead Youth, back yet again with another healing guide. Really trying to get these guides out here for you guys so that you can kind of learn how to play these classes moving into Legion. And then we'll have an update video on each one of the artifact weapons for these healers and how they affect their playstyle. And we'll continue to touch up on them as we move through the expansion, because I do want these to be more of a discussion and less of a this is how you play this class, because as we all know that will probably change patch by patch, honestly. So let's kick off talking about the Restoration Shaman. And let me just flat out say that I don't raid on a Restoration Shaman. I play Elemental or Enhancement in my off time just for fun, and I like a lot of the transmog sets, so I do that kind of stuff too. I don't raid on one, but let me tell you, you need a Restoration Shaman. You need it. These are the backbone of your raid. They always have been. They always probably will be. The healing that this class puts out right now is bar none compared to the other classes, especially per mana cost. When things get dicey, the problem really is they don't have an ability to turn off their healing to an extent. They don't really have the ability to just, lightly spread around some hots while the damage is kind of low. I'll put out one or two atonements and I'll just go to DPSing. Shaman are pretty much DPSing or healing the fuck out of everyone. So they're either blowing the fuck up or healing the fuck up of everyone. And there's really not a lot of middle ground between the two, which makes them excellent in raids, right? They have the ability to heal stack groups better than any other class, with Healing Rain, with Chain Heal, with Spirit Link Totem, so on and so forth. They're amazing, and then even more with artifact traits, which you'll see later. And then they also have just such a powerful toolkit of utility. They have their own Stampeding Roar now. They have, you could really also put Spirit Link Totem in the utility folder. They have a really strong damage reduction. They have Spirit Walker's Grace, and they have a ton of consistent damage abilities that they can use from range without really disrupting anything, unlike Holy Paladins, which have to be in melee range, or Monks, which have to be in melee range, or Discipline Priests, which constantly have to, kind of spin back and forth between DPS and healing. Shaman is just very easy to use in that regard as well. And on its surface, it seems like a very simple class to understand, but really there are a lot of intricacies that go on with it. So it's very easily mechanically to get. There's not a lot of crazy things like Atonement to master, but there are a lot of things and a lot of synergies between all of your abilities baseline, which make the class very deep and complex on a more advanced level. So let's get started talking about what kind of makes some of those abilities happen. And what I really try to get people to understand about the Restoration Shaman more than anything else and more than any other class is that they are all about layering their abilities, and they're all about the idea that you should never really be casting a spell when it's not at its strongest version of itself. And they've been that way for a long time, and they've cut down on it a little bit in Legion, but it's still there. And basically the idea is that you're wasting your mana if you're casting a spell that isn't buffed as much as it possibly can be. And Shaman have a bunch of different ways that they can buff their abilities. And so we're going to constantly be trying to piece those together as we move through talking about our spells and our talents. So without any further ado, let's kind of get a feel for the spell book. For this, because we haven't done a Shaman guide in the previous expansion, we are going to do this pretty remedial. We're going to talk about basically each spell in the spell book that comes baseline for healing first. So the first one I want to touch on is Riptide. Riptide is your standard hot that does an initial heal to a target and then heals them for a pretty decent amount over the next few seconds. It does have a cooldown, so it's not your rejuve, it's not your renew, it's not your spread. You should be applying this towards targets that are really going to benefit from this heal, because you don't get to spam it, right? So more than likely your tanks. Other than that, you have Healing Wave and Healing Surge, which are these two guys right here. Healing Wave is just your normal heal, right? It's your I can't even compare it to Healing Touch because it doesn't take nearly that long to cast, but like if you're playing a priest, this is your heal. It's just very standard, low mana cost, low healing amount, moderate cast time. Then you have Healing Surge, which is your high mana cost, decent healing amount, and high mana cost and fast cast time. So this is your flash heal if you're used to playing a priest, or your flash of light if you're used to playing a paladin. You want to use these in emergency situations. You want to use this one just to top people off, and then Healing Surge to heal in emergency situations. Moving on, we have the iconic Shaman ability, Chain Heal. If you guys have never played World of Warcraft before, I guess I can explain to you what Chain Heal does. But basically, it heals a friendly target, so it heals an initial target. Then it jumps to heal the most injured ally nearby to that target, and then its healing is reduced by 15% per each jump, and it heals up to 4 people. This is a tremendous heal, right? For the mana that it costs, healing up to 4 people, and then always prioritizing the most damaged people within a certain radius makes it what we call a smart heal in the World of Warcraft. And if you don't know what a smart heal is, it's basically just a heal that the game targets for you based on certain conditions. So, for instance, if you're playing a Discipline Priest, even though you really wouldn't consider the atonement that we currently have as smart healing, it kind of is, because it follows a specific requirement that funnels your healing towards a target that has a specific buff on it. In this case, though, when you're playing a Shaman, your healing is going to go towards the players that have the lowest health within a certain radius. And that becomes very, very synergistic with other things we'll talk about later on. But just know that Chain Heal is an amazing spell, and you really want to try to make a lot of use out of it, but it does cost 8,000 mana, so it is not cheap, and you want to make sure that when you do cast it, you're getting the most out of its passive and active buffs that it can have. Other than that, we also have Healing Rain, which is a targeted AoE healing that will do a certain amount of healing over time in one particular spot. There are talents that can further utilize. Is utilize a word? It can't be. Anyway, utilize Healing Rain to further buff your healing, but it's just a nice sort of, basically like it's a hot for everybody that stands in it. So it kind of takes the place of being able to put Renew and Rejuve on targets, but it's just for obviously a very small area, and you most of the time want to have this in the area where there's going to be the biggest clump of players that are going to reliably be taking damage. Pretty simple so far, and all these abilities seem pretty standard, but we're going to continue to layer them up in a minute. So going on from there, that's pretty much all of your basic healing spells outside of Healing Stream Totem. What Healing Stream Totem does is it summons a totem at your feet, which will heal the most injured ally within 40 yards over time. So it is another hot, but it's not a hot that you can target. It is a hot that will find the most injured person, so the person that needs the heal the most, and it will start healing them. Great. And so you might notice that there are a few shaman abilities, just even in the base toolkit, that kind of sound like that, right? Like find the most injured ally, heal them up. And that's really cool because our mastery as a shaman is deep healing. And deep healing basically increases the effectiveness of your healing based on how much of the target's health is missing that you're healing. So as you can tell, number one, this is just a beneficial mastery to have when you're a healer in general, because you're going to be healing people that are low on health, especially because we use all direct healing spells. Unlike Discipline Priest in the past expansion, who would be trying to shield people up and keep them at full health, we want them to take damage because then it's easier for us to heal them up, as long as they don't die, obviously. And so that's really cool. And so a good shaman will be able to target their heals so that they are making sure that they're hitting the person that has the lowest amount of health, so that you're getting the most out of the mana that you use to cast them. So again, each and every one of your spells that you can cast as a shaman will be buffed by your mastery. So you should always be trying to target the player with the lowest health to get the most out of your mastery, because if you don't, you're essentially casting a heal for the same mana cost, but that's healing for less. And it's a very arbitrary basic example, but it holds the point nonetheless. Also, the smart healing nature of some of these spells like Chain Heal and Healing Stream Totem that seek out people to heal benefit from your mastery, as well as they will try to seek out the most injured ally within a certain radius that will also benefit from your mastery. So you have both an active and a passive way to do so, which is why those spells are so strong and will more than likely be towards the top of your list. And then it's up to you as a better shaman to make sure that you're using your Riptide, your Healing Wave, and your Healing Surge on these low health targets to get the most out of your mastery as well. Other than that, we do have a really important passive to talk about, Tidal Waves. Whenever you cast Riptide and Chain Heal, you get a buff called Tidal Waves, which increases the cast time of your next healing wave by 30%. So you can cast your healing wave faster. And then the critical strike chance of your next healing surge by 40%. So this just augments your two very basic heals to the point where even casting those heals there's a little bit of a thought process that goes on because you don't really want to cast either Healing Wave or Healing Surge without having Tidal Waves buff up. And if you see here, if I just cast Riptide on myself and I have this nice hot, and I also have this passive up here, Tidal Waves. And I want to make sure that I use that. So I want to make sure that in between my casts of Chain Heal, I don't want to just be spamming Chain Heal. One, because it's expensive, and two, because there's this buff that I have that only stacks up to 2 times. So anytime that I cast my Chain Heal or Riptide after I have 2 Tidal Waves buffs, I am missing out on that third charge of Tidal Waves, which is very important. It's very important because eventually I am going to have to use a Healing Wave, and I want it to be as fast as possible, or a Healing Surge, and I want it to do as much as possible because I'm spending the mana to cast these abilities. I want to make sure they're the best versions of themselves that I can get. So with that being said, you want to try to stagger and layer your abilities as best you can. If you're using Riptide, don't forget to start casting your Healing Wave and Healing Surge, which is very easy when there's a lot, not a lot of damage going out and a lot of it's single target. You won't have a problem with this. But then when AoE starts to kick up and you can just get into this mindset of I have to chain heal all the time, please make sure to monitor your Tidal Waves buff and not overwrite more than 2 charges of it. Find the time to make sure that you're using these abilities and using them surgically on the targets with the lowest amount of health to get the most benefit for your mastery. That is the secret to being a good shaman. All the other things that we'll talk about from here on out are nice, but as long as you understand that, you're going to actually be better than the shaman next to you, and it will also help you with your talent choices and help you with your artifact, all of those things. If you understand the core of the shaman is using your tidal waves, using all of your buffs as much as you possibly can. You also have another passive called Resurgence, which basically means that whenever you critically strike with any one of your spells, you have a chance whenever you critically strike with your spells, you will be refunded a percentage of your mana, which basically means that for Chain Heal, you'll be refunded 0.25% of your mana every time you critically strike with a Chain Heal. And remember, Chain Heal has 4 separate heals in and of itself, and each one of them has a chance to crit. So on one particular Chain Heal cast, you can get 1% of your mana back if they all crit. With Healing Wave, you get 1% of your mana back. With Healing Surge, you get 60% of your mana back, and so on and so forth. So, yes, that's right. So just a nice passive to have in the back of your mind whenever you're doing these things, and making sure that you know that Resurgence, Tidal Waves, and Healing Surge work really well together. So just kind of bear that in mind. Other than that, those are pretty much like your core healing kit without talking about your cooldowns. So let's talk about those cooldowns. Baseline, you have a really, really powerful raid healing cooldown in Healing Tide Totem, which is just a totem that you drop on the ground that will heal people within 40 yards for a massive amount. And of course, it benefits from your mastery because it will be healing everyone, including people with low health. Awesome. Doesn't get better than that. Then we have the most powerful spell in the game, and you will hear it talked about, but you will see it used incorrectly more times than you'll be told that it's good. Spirit Link Totem. Okay, Spirit Link Totem is the major skill cap of this class, if nothing else. What Spirit Link Totem does is you drop this totem down, it has a little radius, and anybody standing in that radius will take 10% less damage, which is already good. But every 1 second, the health of everyone within that radius will be redistributed so that they all have an even percentage of health. Which basically means if I have someone at 99% health and someone at 1% health, and they're both standing in my Spirit Link Totem, in a second, they will both have 49% health. So kind of think of it like that. So it's almost impossible to die if your shaman places Spirit Link Totem within the right spot, because every few seconds Spirit Link Totem will continuously try to balance everyone's health pool. Think of it as taking health from the person with the highest amount of health and giving it to the person with the lowest amount of health, so that they end up with an even amount. So I'm taking your cookies so I can give it to this other kid so that he's happy and you both have the same amount of cookies at the end of the day. Is how Spirit Link Totem works. This can be great, but it can also be bad, because if you drop your Spirit Link Totem in a situation where your tank has a high amount of health and then everybody else around him has a low amount of health, it will instantly take his cookies, give it to the other kids in the class. He'll be left without a lot of cookies, and then the bully, which is the boss, is going to try to take the rest of his cookies. He's not going to have a lot, and he's going to fucking die. Weird example, I know, but the point is that you can there is a such thing as a really good Spiritling Totem and a really bad Spiritling Totem. It is hard to die for most classes, but tanks can still end up dying under Spirit Link. But it is a major life-saving tool that is bar none completely different than anything else you've ever seen in the game, ever. And so using it in those niche situations, which you can actually, pretty much get it down to a science for certain pools, better groups are better at doing that, but also being able to come out in the clutch with the clutch Spirit Link Totem is amazing. You no longer have 2 charges on it with the Echo of the Elements like you had in WoD, because honestly, that was kind of fucking OP, but it's still very, very good. Right? Other than that, you have Astral Shift, which is your own personal damage reduction cooldown, and Spirit Walker's Grace, which is also a really cool ability, which basically lets you cast freely while moving for every 2 minutes, which is pretty nice, right? It's pretty nice. And you have the standards. You have Purify Spirit, which just removes a curse or magic effect from the target. And then you have Purge, which can remove beneficial magic effects from enemies, which is always nice. And then you have the ability to do a ton of DPS we were talking about before, because you have your Elemental Shaman toolkit here. So you have the ability to cast Flame Shock on the target. You can Lightning Bolt them. You can Chain Lightning. And then you can even have Lava Surge. So you can have your ticks of Flame Shock actually reset the cooldown on your Lava Burst. So you can do a ton of damage in between those moments where you're not really needed to be chain heal spamming. Then you can do a ton of damage. And especially at the beginning of a fight, it's definitely something you should take advantage of. So that's pretty much the basics of how the class plays and pretty much all the buttons that are on my bars right now outside of talents. So let's talk about those. When we go to talents, man, does the Shaman have a really good talent setup in general. A lot of pretty decent choices. Your first tier is going to be between Undulation, which every 3rd healing wave or healing surge cast heals for an additional 50%. Then you have Unleash Life, unleashes the elemental forces of life on a friendly target, healing them by a little bit, increasing the next direct spell by 30%. And then you have Torrent, which basically just increases the initial heal of Riptide. I've taken Torrent here, and it's probably going to be the default just because Riptide is so powerful, and you're going to be casting on the tanks. That extra 40% initial heal will never go to waste as long as you're halfway decent at targeting with your Riptide. And we talked about how important that is, so definitely an easy pick there. Unleash Life just unfortunately doesn't make the cut right now. It's just a little bit behind the other ones. And I wish it still increased your movement speed. It was kind of lackluster in Warlords of Draenor as well, but it was something that was baseline, so you used it because you had it, but not necessarily because you wanted to. I couldn't really see a situation except maybe for 5 bans, like just when there's a lot of heavy tank damage reliably, but the fact of the matter is Torrent will probably make you a better tank healer as well. So, and then Undulation. Undulation is just fine if you wanted to do that as well, because it just further increases your 2 spells, which you're going to be using a lot more than you think. Like I said, you're going to have to pretty much force yourself to eat up those tidal wave buffs, so Undulation is really nice for that. Next, you have Gust of Wind, in your level 30 talent choice, which basically just hurls you forward. So it's kind of like a sprint to leap. It's like a warrior's heroic leap, pretty much, but you're in a tornado. It's weird looking. You have Graceful Spirit, which reduces the cooldown of Spirit Walker's Grace by 60 seconds and increases the movement speed by 20% while it's active, and increases your movement speed in Ghost Wolf form by an additional 10%. Oh, fucking shit, this is amazing. It's so good. Shaman can move way faster than any other healer in the game except for Druids, who also have the ability to shapeshift. But playing a Discipline Priest, oh my god, I wish I had this. This is fucking ridiculous. And the ability to cast on the move, and Ghost Wolf, so good. If you just want a personal movement speed increase, Graceful Spirit is obviously the choice. Though it's really just hard to beat out Windrush Totem, which is not as great of a movement speed increase for yourself, but it's for everyone. It's Stampeding Roar. That's a DPS increase. That's a getting to the next pack quicker. That's a getting back from a wipe quicker for everyone. Probably going to take Windrush Totem, unless there's another Shaman in the raid that also has it. But then, like, I still wouldn't. Why wouldn't you take it? Why wouldn't you have 2? I don't understand. It's really hard to not take Windrush Totem. I guess the only time that you would really realistically have the opportunity to take Graceful Spirit is when you're leveling. Same thing with Gust of Wind. Then you have some sort of CC ability in your level 45 tier. Lightning Surge Totem, basically Capacitor Totem. You drop it down in a few seconds, it explodes and stuns enemies. Earth Grab Totem roots them. Voodoo Totem hexes them. Pick whichever one you want. I think Voodoo Totem looks hella cool, as we'll see it right here. But the other ones are really cool too. But look at that. That's fucking sexy. Oh my god. And I guess it's a Fire Totem. I don't know how that works out. But anyway, level 60, you have a choice between Crashing Waves. Riptide grants you an additional charge of Tidal Waves. Ancestral Guidance. For the next 10 seconds, 20% of the damage and healing that you do is converted into healing on the nearby 3 injured allies. And then Deluge Chain Heal heals for an additional 20% on targets within your healing range or affected by your Riptide. Let's talk about Crashing Waves, right? So Crashing Waves is pretty much just making your Riptide function the way that it did in WoD, where it would give you 2 charges of Tidal Waves right off the bat. This is not that great because, yes, it kind of sucks that Riptide only gives you 1 charge of Tidal Waves in Legion, but the fact of the matter is you can still store 2 charges. You just get 1 charge per cast. I can definitely see people way overcapping their Tidal Waves charges if they have Crashing Waves. And in general, it's only going to potentially be a healing increase if you're really good at using those buffs, which, I don't know. I don't see it being that beneficial. The fact of the matter is I just see people way overriding their buffs. It doesn't give you the opportunity to cast like double chain heal or something like that. It doesn't really give you the opportunity to mix up your spells as much as possible without wasting Tidal Waves charges, which is bad. I actually surprisingly like the change of only having 1 per, but still being able to hold 2 charges overall. Then you have Ancestral Guidance, which is kind of like a mini Ascendance. It takes all of that energy that you're using, whether it's healing or DPS, which is huge because you can drop it while you're doing those DPS in those moments, and you'll know that the healing that's being done is going to the right places. But it also takes that in those situations of heavy raid damage, and is also good because it does the same fucking thing. Like, it's a really good talent, and you can match it up with different damage phases and things like that. Match it up with Heroism or Bloodlust. It's very good. Then you have Deluge, but Deluge is very good as well. Basically just passively buffing your chain heal. Like I said, remember there was a talent in there that said, hey, or when we were talking about Healing Rain, I was like, hey, there's a talent that makes Healing Rain better. And so now it kind of gives you almost like this new Paladin consecration feel to your Healing Rain, where you get some extra benefits for using it there. I'm definitely not going to take this because I'm basically only playing in pugs right now. So I'm not going to take this because there's just no way I'm going to get everyone to stand in my healing range. So I'm not going to try, right? Same thing with the old conductivity. I'm not going to try. But it can be obviously amazing on stack fights, bar none. It'd pretty much be Ancestral Guidance for spread, and then Deluge for stacked, and you don't even really have to think about it much more after that. Level 75, you have a choice between some really powerful abilities for your raid. Ancestral Protection Totem basically will, while you pop it down, while it's active, if a target dies, they will be reincarnated with 20% of their health and mana. Oh my god. If you guys didn't listen to the salutation and the sign off on my Restoration Druid guide, I was going to make a video, and I still am, on things like this, where now in Legion they are incorporating into the healing meta abilities that let you die as an actual thing. So that's like a big thing in Legion, is dying, surprisingly, because not everyone needs to live for a raid encounter to be completed. And in fact, if you can use that to your advantage, sometimes all the better. It kind of started with the end of WoD with sacking people in Archimonde's phases. Kind of the same idea. So you have Shadow Priest, which will eventually sacrifice himself if they take Surrender to Madness. You have Retribution Paladins, which gain a massive buff whenever somebody dies near them. You have Holy Priests, which can burn through all their mana, die, and then be able to free cast for the next few seconds, which is crazy. And so you even have Ancestral Protection Totem, which can bring people back, not Shadow Priest, because it cannot bring people back that have suffered massive damage, more than twice of their health 2 times their health pool. But so in the instance of a holy priest, you could do this if you wanted to have a holy priest, use up all their mana, die, become a guardian spirit, do all that, and then get res by this. Like, it's, well, I don't know, maybe I think you can, because it's just a normal res. It should be fine. And so it's crazy, and I really like this. And I mean, even if you take that out of the equation, if you don't have the classes to make use of that, hell, it's still a really good ability. It can still be used on a tank, assuming they don't take a stupid amount of damage, right? So, I mean, it's a really great ability. But again, I'm doing mostly pugs. I can't tell when people are going to die, other than a tank. So I'm not taking this right now. Even Earth Shield Totem is really good, though. It just continuously pops up absorbs on people, essentially, that reduce damage taken. A reduction in damage taken that's only on a 1-minute CD is really cool. Like, it's really cool, and it's going to lead to a lot of absorbed damage over the course of a fight. So unless like you're really having a problem with people dying, or it's a part of your strategy, you might actually want to go with Earth and Shield Totem, because that's going to mount up over the course of a fight pretty high. Then finally you have Ancestral Vigor. Targets of your Healing Wave, Healing Surge, and Chain Heal and Riptide gain a 10% increased health for 10 seconds. This is important when you're talking about just based on like your heals targeting people based on the percentage of health that they have, and also Spirit Link Totem messing around with the percentage of health that they have, right? Also, just giving them a bigger health pool to work with never hurt anyone. So I like Ancestral Vigor as a very, very general, very general talent choice. If you're just doing 5-mans, if you're doing LFR, if you're doing some pug stuff, what have you, Ancestral Vigor is just honestly never really going to go to waste, right? But the other two abilities in this tier are situationally way the fuck better. It's just Ancestral Vigor is pretty standard, actually, and it used to be a passive, actually, which I don't think a lot of people even knew was happening, right? Level 90, you have Bottomless Depths. Your Resurgence always triggers when you heal a target below 50% or 60% health, excuse me. So you don't have to wait for them crits. Cloudburst Totem. Summons a Cloud Totem near you, which absorbs part of the healing of your spells. And then when it dies or is expired, it basically heals for 25% of all the healing done while it was active, divided evenly amongst all of your targets. So it stores all your healing, then explodes like a grenade of healing. Then you have Echo of the Elements. Riptide, Healing Stream Totem, and Lava Burst now have 2 charges. Okay, and then abilities that would normally reset the cooldown will instead just give you another charge. In addition, when you consume a charge of Tidal Wave, you have a 10% chance to generate a charge of Riptide. Okay. Maybe for 5-mans you take Echo of the Elements. Maybe. Just because it is a strong buff to your single target abilities. It's also a nice little damage buff as well. Maybe you take Echo of the Elements, but the fact that Echo of the Elements does not give you 2 charges of Spirit Link Totem like it used to just makes it that much worse, especially compared to the other 2 abilities, which are actually pretty good. So maybe for 5-mans you take Echo, but not for raiding. Bottomless Depths, if you're having mana issues, go ahead, but also if you're reliably going to be healing targets that are that low. Early in progression, yeah, this will be pretty good talent, actually, because you're probably going to have mana issues and people are probably going to be pretty low. And it should already be a part of your playstyle to be making sure that you're targeting those people that are low anyway. So definitely for progression, probably in early days. But the fact of the matter is, Cloudburst Totem is probably better than both of these abilities in a lot of situations, because now you can very easily, number one, have a Cloudburst Totem down and also have a Healing Stream Totem, or even your Healing Tide Totem, because before totems were all linked via their elements. You could only have one water totem at a time, and it was fucking stupid. Now you don't have to worry about that, and you don't have to worry about having to cast one of those 2 spells to override Cloudburst Totem to get it to heal early. Now if you cast the spell again, it just releases the healing whenever, which is nice. So that added bit of control to the relatively low mana cost per the potential amount of healing that it can do. It's fucking insane, right? It's only 2752 in terms of mana. It's not bad. It can do a ton of healing, and you can pretty much let that release at any point in time that you so choose. So without all the restrictions on it, Cloudburst Storm is now the spell that I've always wanted it to be, which is actually really cool. Then, moving on to level 100, you have some sort of major augmentation to your abilities. You have High Tide, Chain Heal bounces to one additional target and no longer suffers fall off. Right? It's crazy. And then you have Wellspring, which creates a surge of water that flows forward, healing all friendly targets in front of you for a meh amount. And then you have Ascendance, which transforms you into a water ascendant for 15 seconds. That's a long ass time, causing all your healing to be duplicated and distributed evenly to nearby allies. Okay, Ascendance can be really good, and especially depending on if the length of the fight works out to be really nice, where you can use it multiple times where it's necessary. But you will also probably need a lot of setup. You also want to have your healing rain already down, your healing stream totem already down. You want to make sure that maybe you have a couple of heals already going, and then cast Ascendance, and then all that healing will be duplicated out. And obviously when it hits those low health targets, your mastery will kick in and it will be really good. Also, Ascendance and Spiritling Totem are just as good now together as they've ever been, so great. Then you have Wellspring. Wellspring, probably the choice that you're not going to make in this tier, especially for raiding. Can be good in 5-mans or in spread encounters where people are really far off. Ascendance is also good in spread encounters though as well. It just can't be used nearly as often. Also, Wellspring costs way too much fucking mana. That's another reason why I don't like this ability. But also when it comes to Ascendance, you're pretty much prompted to burn through your mana because of the way Ascendance functions as well. So both of them can be pretty intense. Finally, you have High Tide. This is probably just going to be the standard and the staple, and definitely the choice that you're going to make in stacked phases, because you're going to be able to, reliably bounce your Chain Heal more often. But just having an extra bounce on Chain Heal is great, and it no longer reduces the healing between each one of its bounces. What could be better than that? And obviously, Deluge. I wonder how these two spells work together. I have no idea, right? So, pretty simple stuff. Just remember, guys, when you're looking at your Restoration Shaman, remember that it's all about the layering of the abilities. It's all about weaving these things. So you might be tempted to just chain heal the world, right? And you might even be able to get away with it in the current pre-patch because the fights just don't last very long. So you can even achieve stupid healing rounds just by chain healing everyone until you have no more mana. But I encourage you to think before you do that and weave in your spells, weave in your healing wave and your healing surge. And since you have to cast these spells, you might as well get the most benefit out of them by targeting the right players. You want to think about your cooldowns and how you're using those together, how they work with your mastery, how they redistribute your health, because these are not just flat upfront healing increases necessarily as much as they are very interesting abilities that take what you're already doing and redistribute it. Think about your Cloudburst Totem. Cloudburst Totem gives you a ton of stuff to think about. How much healing has it absorbed? When should I be getting rid of it? What else can I do to beef it up? All of these things are things you can be thinking about. Just be super happy that you are as awesome as you are, because you're going to be in a great spot if you choose to play the Restoration Shaman in Legion, particularly in raids, not as much in 5-mans, because you just don't have like a reliable tank healing cooldown, or like a really even a decent hot to place on a lot of players that aren't taking a lot of damage, so you're pretty much stuck hard casting outside of like healing stream totem, which doesn't do a lot of healing up front, unless everyone is stacked, which usually players can't be that far apart, right, in a 5-man, at least in WoD, but you'd be surprised in Legion, pretty big fucking arenas, so you might actually suffer somewhere with using Chain Heal on people, and Healing Rain is not going to get the maximum benefit if you have any ranged players in your group as well that aren't willing to jump into melee. So just kind of bear those things in mind, but you are the kings, or in this case the queen, of your raid group healing. So enjoy that. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Next video we do will probably be Holy Priest, because I have no idea how to play a Holy Paladin. So I'll talk about something I know while I'm researching something I don't. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Have a good one.